We are locking back in. This is backtesting session number 3. Last time I ended off on Bitcoin taking this loss right here. So price was coming up, showing this local exhaustion to the upside within the higher time frame compression, and we got some sort of a confirmation here on news. Although it wasn't the highest quality confirmation, I was willing to give it a try, due to the potential of it being manipulation and having that follow through down towards the range low given the compression. And what ended up happening is we had the most of the expectation correct, although price wanted to come a bit higher. And it's interesting to note because when we took this model right here, this was where we shorted. We had that news push up where we had that news buy to sell to buy, where we swept some of this liquidity down here, making the return to zone overall less high probability. And then we got that confirmation right on that New York push up. So I wanted to give it a try, although I wasn't too familiar with trading in an environment like this. I was willing to check it out just for the sake of gaining the experience, and also because when you take a trade, you journal that, all that kind of thing, and you definitely gain more experience from whether you just were observing the price action. So it was something that I was like, it could potentially work. I can see the idea of it working given the locally semi-pro context, given the news, potential manipulated volatility right there, sweeping the high on New York before getting a reversal. But yeah, it did not end up working. And that interesting to note that demand POI that we had right here, kind of like this entire zone with the overlapping effect right there, that is what didn't serve as a manipulation zone, and it actually did serve to provide a fake breaker structure. And I kind of explained how we're anticipating on a sell to buy to sell right here, so we need this follow through right here to be aggressive. And if we start ranging, building any liquidity in here, it's very likely that we're going to continue with the sell to buy, which is what ended up happening locally there. And we had the expectation order flow correct. The market did not provide any entries again, with our expectation on the main crypto trading pairs, where we were looking for that first move, fake move, especially after coming up here, deviating. I was watching this range for a re-entry on the distribution, would have been much higher probability, but we ended up just getting a 2-tap on a lot of these pairs. So yeah, no proper 3-tap models that we could have traded, but still clean to see the expectation order flow being correct, where we got that local first move, fake move, and then now the anticipation is to get a rotation down, whether that's just a sweep, majority of this liquidity, or it's actually going to sweep the range low. We're going to see. But the idea is that you got this local first move, fake move for the higher time frame first move, fake move. So that's what we're going to be looking for. We can now, we broke that structure bearish after getting that exhaustion coming up and the first move, fake move. So we're going to treat that as a confirmed order flow objective of coming down here. So distribution shorts can be nice. So that's what we're going to be looking out for on, the majority of these main pairs. And overall, this could even get some follow through to the downside, potentially, just due to the exhaustion prior to this range creation, and the overall upward structure that may you want to come into these POIs to continue higher. So those are some of the ideas we're looking for on Bitcoin. Overall, we did put in that bear market low, kind of talked about this very recently, and we got that breaker structure bullish, got the level 2 there, and then now we're trending up. So we got the main market structure shifting to bullish, and this is currently our structure right here. So we can look to put in a higher low within one of these POIs, something like that. But yeah, structure is bullish at the moment, although we are seeing now some exhaustion coming up, so we can definitely get some local pullbacks. And locally here we have that compression. So yeah, that's the context on Bitcoin that we're going to be trading within. Quickly checking out these other pairs. ETH was also looking super nice for a short, didn't manage to get a confirmation. You could have shorted this macro model, but I didn't really like the short of the macro model upon sweeping the extreme liquidity, because one, you have the room for error POI right here, where price could want to come for the supply. Two, it's a macro model that is also semi-counter context. Although I would like to see this low get swept, we would be shorting the bottom of a pivot. So it's not as nice, when you've been downtrending for an extended period of time, to be looking to short the bottom of that pivot, especially when there's room for error within the entry and a much more narrow third tap there. But yeah, we were looking definitely for local shorts. As you can see, you got the 2-tap model. And the thing is, you can't draw this range right here because this isn't valid. It's not a valid range pull due to the market structure. You can see that you swept this low. So technically, right here, you are downtrending. So you can't pull your range from high to low in a downtrend. Let me double check what that Bitcoin alert was. We're coming into POI, ETH, coming down here into POI. I might actually have to cut this short and monitor the live price action because I am watching for a potential model here on ETH, although we are coming down a bit aggressive on this New York session with some, minor supply creation above. But yeah, we're gonna just watch out for that alert. We might have to step out of this a bit early and resume the backtesting session in a couple hours from now. So yeah, this wasn't a valid range. What you can pull is your range from right here, where you're trending down and you're SFPing that market structure. But as you can see, the price came way out of that deviation limit. So, if you wanted to look at it from the PO3 perspective, you technically could do that, given the exception that you had a 1 to 2-tap model. And it had reason to come above the DL tool, given the high probability POI right there. That's very interesting. I wasn't even looking at it from that perspective in the live moment trading, which always goes to show how important it is to every so often zoom out and just reanalyze, given the changes in price action, what is the local context. So, technically, it's just super ugly and it's a 2-tap. So you're already making a couple exceptions, one being that it's a 2-tap and also the fact that it came way above that deviation limit right there. So, it's a bit tougher to trade that. And locally, there was no market structure for a refined entry all the way until down here. So you'd have to be betting on, you can't necessarily de-risk at that local technical target because the RR isn't there for it. That's a 1 to 0.6. So yeah, not looking the best from a trading perspective, although, if you did take that break, you could target all the way down here. You just wouldn't have the ability to de-risk. So yeah, I'm kind of just looking at ETH from the bearish order flow expectation perspective. Lots of liquidity below on ETH. And, the potential that we are in a confirmed PO3, although it's not the prettiest. And then you can see lots of liquidity below here. So definitely looking a bit more bearish locally here on ETH. Going to be looking for distributions on that move down. Preferably we can get, some sort of a move up. We can leave this here. to still decide how I want to illustrate this, just because you can look at it as a range. It's just not the cleanest with the deviation. And you could potentially give this a try if you do establish some really nice acceptance and a new return to zone leading up to this point. You could potentially look to get involved upon a sweep of that extreme liquidity. The ideal case, though, is that we're going to come up and sweep this high and distribute into the supply. So yeah, those are some of the scenarios I'm going to be watching for on ETH. And then, of course, just local distributions within this move down. You can trade a bit lower time frame because of that confirmed order flow objective. So maybe you get a move into like a supply zone up here with a local distribution. That can be nice. And this was your trap zone that ended up getting completely disrespected, kind of proving that order flow objective of coming to here. So yeah, ETH also looking very bearish there. Just didn't really give the highest probability of an entry. Would have been nice to take a short on the altcoin with the order flow expectations on Bitcoin and ETH there. Just didn't really have a whole lot. We had XRP delivering this market maker continuation model. Accumulation didn't really have an entry because two factors. One of them was that we were exceeding the maximum time displacement. We made a really good decision of not entering on this break right here due to the return to zone buildup and, you know, just like lacking quality break, lacking quality third tap POI there. And then, as you can see, price retrace on news and just one aggressive candle, tapping into the third tap POI and then completing that model. Gonna check what's going on in the live markets. Price coming up here. We could potentially, you know, create a new range right there. ETH coming down with another supply creation. So I just have to take a moment to update the TA locally here. Setting away locally. A long in confluence with this sweep would be ideal. Okay, moving on. XRP, higher time frame context. I'd really prefer to see this range creation right here. Which, you know, if you start to see a rotation down, that can definitely be the case. Although we do have some POIs lower, but with the exhaustion coming down, you don't necessarily need to come for them. You are in a local POI. So I'll be watching this range locally here on XRP. Yep. Doge, as you can see, one of the outcomes of a compressing range can be, you know, you get the first move, fake move, sweep the liquidity to the low, then you get that, you know, right as we came above here, I was saying, you know, it's likely we're not going to come back for a third tap, and we're just going to make our way up to there. If we do, it's not going to sweep this low. Most likely it'll be a Model 2, so we're watching for the Model 2 there. And price ended up just expanding up. There was that supply zone directly above that range high, and we got the rotation down. So, you know, I'm now kind of viewing this overall price region on Doge as somewhat of a compression. As you can see, we kind of had some exhaustion to the downside, then we got a wick to the upside. From there, we formed this range. You know, we kind of just sub-liquidate on both sides, kind of putting you in a neutral context overall within this higher time frame range, and then you started compressing, getting some exhaustion locally here to the downside. So, you know, within this, we could look at this range creation here now. pull these in. Yeah, not the cleanest. Gotta have your charts clean. Just deciding how I want to illustrate this compression here. I like this. Okay. Yeah, that's fine. Getting the rotation down. If you can, start building liquidity on this move down, this could be a decent place to accumulate here on Doge. Locally, though, price is looking fairly bearish, where we got a sell to buy to sell. So I would expect, I wouldn't expect a buy from here. I would, I could see this move continuing to the downside or cooling off and just creating a range in this region. But yeah, rotation down to this range low would not surprise me. Got some supply levels above us. And finally, moving on to Solana. Still within this overall environment here on Solana, but we are starting to get a bit dragged out right here. So, clean some things up here. Okay, so we have this compression. We got the first move, fake move with the distribution, and from here, expectation, it's a semi-pro context for a rotation all the way back down to here, but it's not yet confirmed. So it's not that pro context that you have when you sweep this low. You get the aggressive and down sweeping this low, and then you have that pro context where you actually have the confirmed expectation of coming there. Currently, it's just semi-pro as long as we're in this region. And then from there, we started seeing some exhaustion and then bouncing from that key demand POI prior, like literally right here. If you start working this, that's when you can start looking at a rotation all the way back down. But then we saw so much exhaustion coming into the level, and now we're starting to see a range. So we're getting, break of structure bullish, break of structure bearish, back to back, just a clear indication of a range. So, I'll put the range on the chart just to respect the range, but we're not necessarily seeing swap liquidity to the upside, exhaustion to the downside, but we are in an overall bearish order flow expectation. Yeah, kind of how I'd view Solana here. Where we technically broke our main market structure back to bullish, but we broke that shit directly into supply, with this being a true structure to really confirm that the bear market low is in. So we're ranging. We came up into that supply, started ranging. If we can pop up, that could be nice, but at the same time, with all this liquidity you're starting to build below, the ideal case is then to come and sweep this low for that higher time frame range. Not that it has to happen though, because of this aggressive liquidative move here, and then the sweep of the low, that could already be enough to put in that bear market low on Solana. Double checking this. Okay, so yeah, 20 minutes in and we have covered all of the context for all of these pairs. I'm gonna resume. I'm gonna do a couple of these videos today, these backtesting videos, just to, because I only got another 30 minutes to backtest it, and I might have to end it early just due to, watching the live price action. Of course, that takes priority. but then, I'll resume and just won't go over the high time frame context within that next video and just be more price action, watching the development of price action focused. So yeah, just gonna start letting this play. Getting that move up. Okay. Yeah, coming into what seems like your first resistance POIs, although it's a super low time frame POI, probably a 15-second structure supply, but not even. Just popping up a bit there. This being a nice looking POI for retracement here. ETH creeping up. Remember that we're watching that POI, but also local models on the way down to what I'm calling a confirmed order flow expectation of coming to here, with somewhat of an asterisk, just because the development did have some caveats. Okay. Bugging out a bit. Could start to see some range creations here. XRP really just at the EQ of a range. Seeing some signs of distribution, 7 hours in duration there. Not necessarily coming into a POI. Sweeping, this local liquidity. There's some supply locally there above. Super low volume and low liquidity in these candles on XRP on the lower time frame here. Just something to note. So yeah, Bitcoin coming into a region of resistance here. If we start closing up above this zone or closing, up above this level right here on the higher time frame, the first move, fake move here could get invalidated, and maybe we see the compression just extend. That can always happen where you kind of get like a local pop out, and then the compression just extends before, getting a real first move, fake move. So got to be aware of that this didn't do anything super significant. We didn't even sweep a swing point. We just saw some exhaustion and a pop out of, what we were visually calling compression, but not actually sweeping any liquidity. So if we do come up here and form a range, that could be nice. But yeah, here we are in this POI of rejection. We have this range on XRP we could watch. I'll just highlight that for now and just click through and see how this decides to develop. Yep, just completed there. see if ETH has came up. ETH is getting that move up that we said we wanted to see. Really going to be picky with entering just upon simply a break structure right here. But, you know, things are currently developing nicely for that. Bitcoin here, forming a range in our rejection region. Some refined supply above it. Okay, yeah, we got some good potential developments right here. Highlight the local buy to sell, or even the local, I guess, kind of a buy to sell almost, but you can also kind of look at this as just a sell to buy to sell. Either way, there's a lot of aggressive price action, so we can expect a range formation or a continuation in that direction, as opposed to another volatile move in the opposite direction. I think we actually had something very similar recently on Pump Fun, but from the inverse perspective. Let me pull that up real quick. Put it side by side right here. Let's see if I can just get these side by side real quick, just to compare how that ended up playing out on Pump Fun. Okay, not perfect, but we can get that comparison. So Pump Fun here had distribution model, came to the technical target, where Doge, we'll just inverse this. Doge had some sort of a distribution model that came to the technical target, reverse back up, sweeping the high, reverse back up, sweeping the high, reverse back down, sweeping the low, reverse back down, sweeping the low, and then reverse back up again, where Pump Fun got the continuation to that range high, which would be Doge getting that continuation to this range high if they're going to play out in a similar fashion. So yeah, very similar price action there, surprisingly. Because it's not too common that you see that buy to sell to buy. Real quick, actually. Send an alert to that low, just to get notified in advance, so we're not, you know, last minute moving, looking around, trying to figure things out. And finally, we had Solana here, coming into a nice POI for rejection, but not in a ranging formation just yet. Following somewhat of a curling up bottom that came into supply. It kind of hit the technical target of that curling up bottom, with a bit of exhaustion came into supply. So this could be, you know, either an extension, an extension of that curling up bottom, or price is not ready to reverse after completing the curling up bottom. Just wants to, you know, generate a bit more liquidity prior to having that reversal, which I would be leaning more on that end. But, you know, we only trade the confirmations, and currently there's no range. Yes, I'm gonna move slow through this price action because there's a lot developing. See if we continue to the upside from here. Bitcoin ranging, XRP ranging, Doge ranging, Solana sweeping that high. So we'll see. I mean, we're not closing above the block just yet. So this would be your area to create a range. You don't want to, you know, get too much of a move above there, or else it looks like you're going to continue with that rounding up bottom, or just seek out, you know, this extreme supply right here. It's always an option. Highlight that real quick. Could do something like this, coming into that supply POI. Starts to look like the idea I was talking about on Bitcoin with the extended compression. It really does. Might actually shift my TA to that perspective, because this is honestly a cleaner compression than, I mean, they're both pretty clean. This was super tight down here at the end, where you got the first move fake move, but it failed to have the necessary follow through this crucial POI, and then you form that higher time frame compression. So I'm gonna adjust my TA to that. But I do want to keep in mind that the fact that we could have already had the necessary first move fake move prior to a reversal. They're not necessary, but just the first move fake move prior to a reversal. So I'll just leave this guy on the chart. That manipulated move. Some sort of a demand mitigation here. That went over into a higher time frame compression. Where internally you have this range. It's actually pretty clean for an internal range. It's honestly, you know, this is why it's good to, you know, take a step back, zoom out, and view the price action from a different lens. It's tougher to just trade this as an internal range, though. I would much rather get local TCT confirmation there. But yeah, just looking at this price action right here, that's a pretty clean internal range where you have the distribution in the second tap, bit of a deeper second tap, but it distributed and it mitigated this extreme supply. So it had reason to come deeper, and then you get the tap 3 that's a bit more shallow, mitigating, you know, the lowest part of the valid extreme supply, deviating tap 1. Aggressive breaker structure back in, nice topping formation there. Could have even used a refined entry inside of there, although this move up was a bit aggressive, but, you know, I had reasons to do so with this liquidity buildup. One moment. Sorry about that. So yeah, this is interesting on Solana. interesting perspectives, new perspectives to take, where just on the higher time frame range, it could be that you got this breaker structure. You got this breaker structure here locally, and then you went over into a redistribution here. It is a bit high time frame and internal, so I don't necessarily like that, but it is attached to that compression. Where, let's just remove all this for a moment. Got the break. Got the compression. Could be. Could be for sure. This might actually be the TA that I roll with. Unless, this idea gets invalidated by price moving up. And we see, another first move, fake move out of this compression. Because we are lacking a bit of follow through. Unless we just go from here. Which locally, the one thing you do have is this beginner potential distribution, but it's really not the prettiest. It is in that extreme supply though. This is a super nice PY mitigation right here though for the third tap. Like that's exactly what you want to see price getting, the harsh breaker structure and pivot. Yeah, man, this is interesting. That is interesting for sure. Very curious to see how this plays out. I think this is a good stopping point for this video, and I'll pick back up, with these potential opportunities we have evolving right here on a Doge, on an XRP, on ETH, creeping up there, but already showing some local signs of distribution that ideally just go into exhaustion, which can make for a really nice third tap right there. And on a Bitcoin here, just compressing locally. But yeah, I'm gonna call this one here, and I'm gonna pick back up in a couple hours from now, exactly where we left off. And I'll just have to upload that as 2 separate videos, so. This will be backtesting session 3, part 1.